BIC episode number 61. And on this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit of feedback on a most recent video on the YouTube channel, have a little bit of fun with that. But then we're going to do another little collector topic. We've done the player collector topic already. But now this time around, we're going to talk a little vintage. Speaking about a little bit of vintage, we've actually got different ways that we do our collecting for it. So we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of what we're working on now, kind of the thought process behind that, maybe a little bit of our history with it, but then also kind of what our plans are with some of that going into the future. So a very collector-centric topic on it on this episode of the BIC podcast. I know that a lot of folks do enjoy the collector-centric topic, so I figured this would be a good one to touch on. So, and it's an easy one, honestly, for us, because we've got, like I said, a lot of different angles that we can take on it, and a lot of different history and our different respective ways of collecting. Before we do, I want to touch on a little bit, since the most recent video on the YouTube channel was the one where I had a little bit of fun talking about Cards HQ. For the most part, I want to thank everybody for their feedback, and the response has been really good on it so far. A lot of people got more or less what I was going for with that one, although some people are a little bit denser than others and struggle a little bit with it. The struggle is real, but that is to be expected. But I did think one thing kind of when I was talking to Brandon and Eric, and this is kind of a thought process that came through with me as I was checking out the feedback and I was looking at it, and I kept thinking to myself, how would this have looked if I had gone the direction that you could have? Because a lot of times the temptation is you could very easily have clickbaited the hell out of that video. It wouldn't have taken much. And I was just telling the guys that as it was, I took Jeff Wilson video, I put a picture and I put it on the thumbnail and all that. But really all I said, the title said Cards HQ early letdown, which is pretty light. It's actually very light comparatively to the direction I could have taken it. I could have said Cards HQ disaster, Cards HQ already failing, question mark. There's a million little ways I could have phrased it that would have been very clickbaity and, put the Jeff Wilson thing there, flames and all kinds of things going on, disasters, and make it a lot more dramatic than what it actually ended up being. Where it really came down to is I was looking at the concept of innovation, the concept of kind of the grandiose early promises of the Cards HQ thing with the understanding, which what's funny is that in the video, I include the caveat that I understand they haven't activated everything. I took that into account when I was having that discussion. I also took into account the possibility that they could pivot and do other things, and I expect them to do certain things. But I was surprised that thus far, even in what has been promised for the future, hasn't been more ambitious to kind of match up with that initial aim that he was throwing out there. Because this was a follow-up video to what I did in December before they even opened. And at that time, I already thought it's like, well, you're already acting like this stuff that already exists is new, and you're bringing another twist to it. It's like, no, I've literally already seen this. And a few people in the comments were like, oh, I've never seen this before. It's like, where have you been? I've seen every aspect of it so far. And some of it I've seen more, and some of it I've seen better. There's nothing wrong with you doing it. And by the way, who said you have to reinvent the wheel? You could just take elements that work, combine them, and then do that in the shop. That's a perfectly viable strategy. Why wouldn't you do that? That's why I had a little bit of fun with it. And some people got it and some people didn't. And I will say one more thing is kind of a little bonus for you guys here on the YouTube side. So we know that our AI overlords are slowly taking over. But I will say there are times where you can have a little bit of fun with AI. And I will say that I did have a little bit of fun with it. And this goes back to my analogy from the live stream. Eric, it is the Costco-sized McDonald's. I did it. I have successfully pulled it up. Y'all, now you know what this could be the future. The future.
I
think we need a little bit larger, though. By the amount of parking spaces there, it looks a little... The ratio is a little off.
I'll get the robots back on it. But by the way, that was an AI. So if you are watching the YouTube version of it, you're seeing a picture of effectively a Costco like structure building with a gigantic arches. And this was an AI generated image. And I basically punched in McDonald's the size of a Costco. And that's what came out.
It looked like over on the left there was some clearing being done. They might be working on the expansion to get it to the
perhaps
appropriate size.
All I'm thinking about is the ball pit.
It'll be sensational.
Swimming pool size, Olympic swimming pool size ball pit. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be the dream. Let me tell you, everybody knows if you supersize it, that makes everything better. Everything better. That's all you got to do. So that was one thing. Go ahead.
Have you guys seen the double Big Mac they got? I'm just saying, like,
Very good.
I have never consumed a Big Mac, nor have I consumed a Whopper. I think you both probably can figure out the reasons why.
there's
And
no mayonnaise on a Big Mac.
there's the special sauce, which is mayonnaise and ketchup.
Not really.
You do know on a Whopper. So look, forget McDonald's for a second. McDonald's doesn't actually make hamburgers. Just to be clear, McDonald's doesn't make hamburgers. They have a colored piece of cardboard with like spray painted flavor on it. Yeah. The Whopper though, you can choose what you put on it. You don't have. You can keep it basic if you want to.
I'm good. Not just double cheeseburgers. When the random occurrence comes and I go to a Burger King, just double cheeseburgers. I'm good. I don't even get fries. I get 2 double cheeseburgers, say thank you, and drive away.
I'm gonna have to put an email in to make it required and mandatory for Burger King to put mayo on every sandwich, that the customer may remove it if they so choose, but it needs to be a required mandatory condiment on every sandwich produced by the company.
Lest we go into Friday mode, because we're getting dangerously close to it, I will tell you, because I've got ideas of what I could do to fix this, but I'm going to save them for Friday. For now, we shall move on. We shall move on here for a moment. Okay. So one more thing I wanted to touch on, actually, and this will be just a little supplement to what I was talking about. So, like I said, just following up in that feedback, like I just found it very interesting that some folks seem to believe that this was actually innovative in some way, and we're trying to make this argument. I'm like, no, I've seen almost every aspect of this tried in some capacity or another. And I did also make reference to Legends of the Game. So I was showing the guys a little bit of a video, some pictures related to it. So I want to show you guys a couple of things here. These are old pictures, relatively speaking, but also not fully representative of what I was shooting for, but it'll still give you a little bit of a taste if you are seeing the video. And I'll try to describe it as best I can. So the first picture I'm going to show is actually from the inside of Legends of the Game circa 2011, 2012. Somewhere in that time period. And it's actually a pretty decent size shop in terms of the length of it. And it's got a decent amount of things going on in the walls and that. And if you guys want to help me, we can describe it a little bit here. But what I will say is the important thing, if you are able to see the pictures that I'm showing, is that this is actually representative of less than half the size of the original version of it. And I'll give you a different picture that I'll give a little bit of a context for. But what happened is this particular unit, it had a decent width to it in terms of ability to do a bunch of showcases. And what you're missing in this case, because you got a wall now on the left side, is that you actually had that space open. It was an open space concept. You had a larger space, and in there you were able to have a gigantic showcase down the middle that allowed you to house. And each sport and category had its own area, because baseball had its area, hockey, of course, had its area, football and basketball had its area, non-sports you could have its area. You know, I remember wrestling cards and things like that available there, and you were able to get all those things. But you also had jerseys, you had equipment, you had wax boxes, you had all your different supplies, binders, and a wall on the left side. When you first entered, you would have a wall on the left side of wax packs, including older wax packs going back to the early 80s and sometimes even the late 70s for a while before basically that stuff sold out. So they had an extensive collection of all kinds of stuff. But one thing you can't fully make out on this picture is that as part of it, in the pillars that used to present when you had the full version, in the pillars, you would have them full of a display with sports equipment, old sports equipment, vintage programs, and all that. And they would develop these themed. So if you had a baseball one, you'd have an old baseball glove, a program, some cards, and it'd be these beautiful displays in the middle of these pillars that would actually show off a bunch of stuff they had, in addition to what they would sell you in the showcase. This is what it looked like in the early 2010s. But go back 20 years earlier to the early 1990s, and that place was hopping. There were people all over it in that area that they were in, and it was craziness. And it was a much bigger space, more than double the size of the image that we're looking at here, more than 30 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I was there in '99, I visited there when it was much bigger, and I was recalling how it looked back then with you earlier about how it had the glass cases in the middle of the shop, and kind of you could walk around in like a square, and it was hopping, like you said. It was very, very busy, and I was that was my first time going to Canada. It was my first time going to a card shop in Canada, and to see that much hockey, I was completely overwhelmed. I don't even remember. I honestly cannot remember if I even bought anything. I just remember going in, seeing things that I didn't know existed, um, and just
People.
well, I don't like people. So
Mm.
there were some people there, and they were Canadian, so that's even worse. They're all just going sorry, sorry, and it just drives me bananas.
Yeah, and you were just there being sorry.
Yeah, and it's just I have my Massachusetts, just outside of Boston type attitude, and it's like, what do you mean by that? You want to go? So I was very confused by all the stories, but it was a huge place. It was just filled with hockey stuff, and that was my first taste of cards in Canada, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah. And last thing I'm going to show is two quick images again, just to give you context. I'll describe it to the best of my ability. I'll try. But the image here is the storefront, again, circa early 2010s, but in late 2000s, late aughts. And by this point, it had already been divided. And what you can see from the front facade here is that you've got the card shop over on the right, and you've actually got a Tim Hortons over on the left. But when it was in its apex and its heyday, the entire unit was actually the card shop, both sides. So you went through the one set of doors and you actually went all the way through, and you would be faced with the entirety of the card shop. So it'd be all the way down the line for the entire unit. And that was the key piece to that. And then this last image here is actually the side of the building where the restaurant is, so the Tim Hortons. And you can actually see, just looking at the image in terms of the size of the bicycles and the size of everything else, is like you can see the length. The length of that unit is actually pretty long, and it actually has a decent width to it. So I don't know what the square footage was. I couldn't even hazard a guess, but I can tell you it was actually a pretty sizable space where they were able to fill a lot of stuff, and they filled it. The point is, in that era, they had it full to the brim with all kinds of stuff, full showcases. They had bought collections and collections and stuff was coming in all the time, and transactions were happening, especially in that early 90s period. Like I said, it was hopping, and people were buying, and as fast as people were buying, more stuff was being brought in, and it was being shoveled into every corner, nook, and cranny you could fit it into. It was stuffed to the brim in its apex. So I'd love to be able to give you the real context so you could really understand what it looked like at that time period. You just have to believe me. It was a crazy shop, especially for the time period. Really ahead of its time comparatively to what we talk about today. But that's why when I look at those bigger shops, this Cards HQ concept, you got to remember, I have to put it into context with what I've experienced and seen. So when you tell me that it's this, and I go, yeah, but I've seen that. I've seen it applied. I've seen it tried. I've seen, again, this was 30 years ago. And even with this is like almost 20 years ago. I'm showing you these images, and you can still get a little bit of a taste, even a scaled down version of what it looked like. This is after the boom had ended. The original boom had ended, and we were already far into the descent. After that, it was a very much of a quiet period for that. And even then, multiple management changes and all of it, it was still a pretty decent sized shop, especially for that era. It was still hanging in there for a while before it finally closed its doors.
I just want to say
All right.
again that when it comes to Cards HQ and Jeff, because read the comments and some people were kind of defensive, and I just want to point out again a couple of things. One, you have stated you don't have a dog in this fight, and you don't care either way if he's successful or if he fails. And knowing you, I totally believe that. Um, Brad and I have come on here and stated that we hope it is successful. We're rooting for it. We want it to be successful. We've definitely discussed this on this platform and on the Friday show, and you know, put our 2 cents in on what we think should happen or what they should do, and we kind of brainstormed a little bit, and but nobody on because I'm Carlos has said Jeff Wilson's a bad guy. We hope hope the shop burns to the ground. We hope that he fails miserably. So we're not coming from that perspective where a lot of people in the hobby and content creators and people on Instagram and other platforms, are just rooting for this to fail. That just doesn't make sense to me. But it is a big deal. It is newsworthy. It's a big goings on in our hobby right now. So to keep an eye on it, and even if I'm all for it, being able to have a constructive conversation about it while rooting for it to be successful, there's nothing wrong with that. So, I mean, I just wanted to point that out, that there's nobody on this platform going, I hope the place crumbles tomorrow. I just kind of want that stated.
Do you, and this is for both you and any viewers, listeners, whatever out there, do you guys think, because to go back to something you just said, Eric, you said it's a big deal. And if you remove Jeff, Jeff and his YouTube and content and everything else from it, and you just have a new shop opening up across from, Brave Stadium, whatever, in Atlanta, Georgia, and
Yep.
Joe Schmo is running this shop. And it's not a big spiel going about it, and it's not Jeff Wilson and everything else. It doesn't then become such a big deal.
It's not.
I think
So your point is right. You're correct. But that's the reason why, even in the video, I led. So just, and I appreciate Eric giving that angle off to it as well. It's important to give that, and I want to make sure we're very clear on this. Two things. The only reason it's newsworthy is because it is Jeff Wilson, because of where he has become positioned in the hobby, for better or worse, whether people agree or disagree. And the proof is in the pudding. This, I always like to be very clear about this. The proof is in the pudding, because to your point, if it wasn't Jeff Wilson, would it be as big a deal? Even if somebody built a card shop of the exact same size and the exact same, no. The answer is no, and the reason is because he is a polarizing figure in this space. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't want to offend people by saying this, and I haven't, throughout the last several years of Jeff, and it's nothing of him personally. It's just his content wasn't that appealing to me. So when I say this, I'm not meaning it like to piss anybody off on either side of the spectrum, but he is essentially the Dr. Beckett of the card space today. Beckett created Beckett Magazine. He created Market Movers, and he was kind of the one to roll out that digital app that had card pricing and everything else right there at your fingertips or whatever. So I'm not saying on the level of importance, I should say, to the hobby, but what he created, he basically took and created a digital pricing platform that many people grasped to, and he was very smart. He rolled it out at the perfect time. I mean, the hobby was booming, the pandemic hit, everything else, like a lot of pieces rolled in to make it as big as it was. So, am I saying he is as legendary? No, but if you put time periods in place, that would be the best comparison I think you could do for this time period of who he is.
The
If that
opinions
makes any
expressed are
sense.
those of the Santa Claus looking guy over here. It's like, I just want to be clear that Eric Sanderson Deor and Carlos, of Because I'm Carlos, do not necessarily co-sign on any of these statements made by Brandon's of Bobbles and Ball Cards and 540 Flips. I just want to make sure we're clear on this point. So send your correspondence in that direction, please, and thank you. Good day.
You understand what I'm saying, though.
I understand what you're saying.
Level of popularity.
Listen, so let me finish my point. Let me finish my point, and you'll understand why I needed to put that caveat qualifier. That was very important. So as I said, Jeff Wilson is a very polarizing figure in the hobby. And again, the proof is in the pudding. How do I know this? Because in the video, as I mentioned a little earlier, I could have very easily tweaked my title just a little bit, and it would have, I made a joke with the guys before we hit record that I probably could have 10x the views on it if I had just made a slight modification to it, changed the thumbnail to show Jeff Wilson with flames and all this stuff, and made it very dramatic. It would have been very easy to do. I could have left the video completely untouched, left it completely alone, and it would have invited way more people. As it is, just having him on the thumbnail, because I was talking about CardsHQ, so it is pertinent. It's not, it's related to what's going on there. But just by having him on there, it picked up the amount of views and clicks that the particular video got. If it was just Joe Schmo running a card shop exactly the same, it would not have drawn a fraction of the attention, a fraction of the traction, guaranteed.
And that's that's the part I wanted to just kind of reiterate, because everything you guys have said regarding how much attention this is getting and how, I said it was important, and you commented on that. I agree with you 100%, up until the point of we wouldn't be paying any attention to it if it was Joe Schmo. I think this is still a big enough deal that even if Joe Schmo, and I really want to meet him because I hear about him all the time, did this, I think we'd still be discussing it, but there wouldn't be so much passion, feelings, emotion, excitement, discontent, all these other feelings that are going through the hobby regarding this, and it wouldn't be getting the attention and publicity. I agree 100% with both of you on that. But I think if someone opened up a $14,000 card space, was doing all this on, was saying they were going to do all this online stuff, they were going to have, cameras up and down the aisles, where we're working with, we're going to be working with PSA for grading. We're going to be working with Fanatics for cards. We're going to be dealing with BCW for products. We're going to, I would hope that we'd be discussing that. That's news. That's interesting. And then I think more people would be positive. Like, all the Jeff Wilson haters hate it because of him. They want it to fall apart because of him. I think a lot of those people would probably support Joe Schmo for doing the same thing.
And that's something I need to reiterate when I compared the two of them. I wasn't talking about on the level of being loved and when Carlos used the word polarizing, he's not at the level of popularity he's at, like Dr. Beckett was, for being liked. Jeff probably has like a 70-30 split, maybe, of likability and haters. And so he's got the popularity level. It's just not on the same basket of folks as what Dr. Beckett would have. So I want to clarify that. What I meant by comparing the two is just the level of being known in the hobby,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's fine.
I think it'd be interesting to see how it would play out. I think it'd be tough because one of the things we were talking about before we hit record is I went looking just to get comparison's sake, and one of the examples I pulled up was David Adams. And David Adams has a different model. They've got a different approach to how they're doing their stuff. But I've talked in the past that I knew they had a large space, but I wanted to get context for it. And I was sharing it with the guys a little bit. Unfortunately, the images they took, they need to update their pictures a little bit. But I think I can show a couple here just to give a little bit of context. So if you check out David Adams Card World, so a lot of you may be familiar with them from their online presence. So right here, you're looking at, so here what I'm showing you is I'm showing an image from their website showing some of the wax they've got on display in their warehouse / showroom / store that they've got going on. And it's a pretty sizable amount. And you've actually got a nice little John Cena cameo, if you can see him. Probably not, but he's there in the corner somewhere, allegedly.
He's the security.
But look,
he's the
did
security.
you notice those prism boxes just sitting out on the table?
Yeah, craziness.
I
can guarantee you it's an older image, but I think the point that I want to get across here, though, is I'll scroll through some images, but the point I want to get across here is that this is just a section of the overall size of this store. Their store is 42,000 square feet. You could literally fit Cards HQ into a corner of their overall store in terms of physical. So it's not about this weird game of physical stuff. The 14,000 pops off the page because you're thinking about a card shop. Well, in this case, these guys have the trading card area, but they also have memorabilia. They're based just out of Buffalo. So they've got jerseys of the Sabres and the Buffalo Bills. And then you've got type of memorabilia that you're going to put on the wall. You've got a Mary Lemieux jersey, a Sidney Crosby jersey, a Andre the Giant Hulk Hogan picture autographed. So you got a wall showcasing this kind of memorabilia. And then you got another wall and another area and just shirts and merch and all kinds of things that you got all the way down the line. Another wall with a different set of shirts. And you just keep scrolling through, and this is section by section, and you can see from the image that I'm showing here just how long it goes all the way to the end and then wide. It's basically
this is Costco type space.
Yeah, this is a very large space, a retail kind of commercial space designed for housing but they're using it for all kinds of stuff. It isn't just a card shop. So just having space for the space's sake, well, great. That's wonderful. But what does that mean? What are you doing with it? Well, they have a very specific design and they had an idea of what they were trying to accomplish. But they also do a lot of the stuff, like I said, they'll sell merch and different things. Their in business is designed to do a lot of different things. And here's a section on board games. So it's collectibles, it's gaming, it's merchandise, it's all kinds of stuff. So because they're doing all these things under one roof, then the additional space is justified. It makes sense why they would have it. The point is, this type of business still does operate though in the sports card space. They've got a warehouse still. They do mail order. They do all these things. And then from a content standpoint, they've got a weekly podcast that they do on Twitch. They do have it on YouTube, but YouTube doesn't get a lot of traction for them. But on Twitch, it gets a little bit more. So the idea here, though, is that a lot of these components and elements. So when I'm critiquing it and I'm talking about it, a lot of these elements have been tried in different components. By the way, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. And that was one of the things I came back to one of the commenters when we were talking about. And like I said, most of the commenters were very good. So I was happy to engage and have a little bit of back and forth with some of them. But I said, there's nothing wrong with taking ideas that work and then putting your own twist on them and using them. Because if it works, hey, why wouldn't you use an idea that worked? You want to try some different stuff that's a little bit different. Hey, knock yourself out and go for it. The problem was, and maybe it was lost. This message was lost in the discussion for a while there. My point was, you started off by overpromising and under-delivering. Right now, you're in the midst of under-delivering because you start off with the grandiose. If you just wanted to start the shop and say, hey, we're going to try some stuff. Some of it may work, some of it may not work, but we're going to give it a shot and see how it goes. And we're going to try to have all these breaking pods, and we're going to try to do it this way, and we're going to try to do some live selling and all that. The way I just phrased it right now, I don't think there's any reason to critique or criticize anything because, okay, you didn't say you were going to have it on day one. You didn't say it was going to revolutionize retail. You didn't say people were going to study it, which is what he actually did say, which is a little different than what I just said.
That almost seems like a common theme, though, in this hobby or like this, this niche market or whatever, because you see it time and time again where companies or whatever will throw out ideas or even we all like questioned it when Fanatics came into the picture and was like, we want to 10x the hobby, and it was like, how do you plan on doing that, especially from this moment right now? Like, so it always seems like these promises are made of these huge big things, and then we're looking at it like, sure, you know. So it's just funny that you said that it was like kind of over promising type thing, and I think that happens a lot in this space, not just by him or Cards HQ or whatever. I think that just is a common theme in this hobby in general.
I agree. I think though it's different for me when you've got somebody who's heading up a larger company and you're telling that to like potential stockholders and that because when he says 10x the hobby and we talk about this extensively on the Friday Live, believe me, we've talked about it extensively. At no point did anybody ever say what the baseline was. That's the funny thing about saying 10x or 5x or 2x or whatever. 10x sounds exciting, it's a nice headline grabber, but compared to what? What are we basing it on?
Our hobby was 10x during the pandemic.
Yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying. But the point though is, if you decide randomly to pick a time point before that, you could declare victory now. Like if you pick the right spot, if you cherry pick the right spot, you can get whatever number you're looking for. But again, because we don't know what the baseline is, like
2018,
it would be hard to say. Yeah. The key though is that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Even if you 2x, 5x, whatever, it would still be a substantial rise in business, all things considered. And if you manage that, hey, fantastic. But again, if you pick a weird baseline, you probably already got there. So it depends on what you're talking about. As far as this is concerned, though, as I said, at a smaller scale, you had to know if you're the folks building this out that it was going to take some time for you to activate a lot of the components of it. The problem is, so to put it this way, again, going back to the polarizing thing, I think there were folks who were trying desperately to declare victory in the first week. And I'm sitting there like, you haven't even turned on everything else. And like I said, one of the pushbacks I got is that, well, you're doing stuff with AMG. And by the way, this is going to be a segue to me to bring the AMG thing into it because I figured now would be a good time to do it. AMG Collectibles, amgcollectibles.ca. Scrolling ticker across the bottom of the screen. And the AMG Collectibles YouTube channel, where tomorrow there'll be another episode coming up where we'll record it and then we'll be able to talk about some new products coming into the space. But Now, the reason why I wanted to make sure we got that in there, and thank you to AMG Collectibles, friend of the channel, and this podcast. But part of the reason I also wanted to mention is one of the little piece of pushback I got is, well, you're doing a thing with the card shop, Also, the other angle, not even related to card shop, I got to say, oh, you're just jealous. And my first instinct when I'm feeling like more of a jerk, because in that video I was being very nice, relatively speaking. But my first instinct when I'm being more of a jerk is like, jealous of what? It's like jealous of somebody who bought a boat with a hole in it. You had the money to buy the boat, I grant you that, but it didn't seem like the best idea in the world to me. If you give me $3 or $4 million, by the way, I can tell you right now, Brandon, I'm willing to make a wager for anybody that wants it. If someone wants to give me $3 million, I can guarantee $150,000 return by the end of 12 months, and I will not lose the principal. And I don't have to do it, and it's risk-free. I guarantee you I will get $150,000 profit. In order to successfully do what I just said, CardsHQ, with the money they've already spent, they're $3 million in the hole. So they're going to have to make at least $3,150,000 in profit to match what I just said. So it is a business. You have to put money in and invest it in order to build up a business. So granted, and if you're going in the long haul, then that's fine. Over the course of time, your plan is to chip away back at it, build yourself back up, and with profits over time, be able to grow and do all that. But at the moment, and that was the point of the video, they're not fully activated. At the moment, they've got Whatnot streams going. They've started doing some of the breaks now. And so from a personal standpoint, there's nothing to be jealous of. The man just bought a $3 million liability at the moment. Is there potential? Sure. Is there a possibility they can get to where they're going to get to? Sure, absolutely. But it's start. At the moment, right now, he's got a $3 million bill. That's what he's got. So, Eric, I'm not jealous of that. I'm not jealous of that. Thank you.
I'm not jealous of the debt by any means, no.
Well, I mean, people are saying that you're jealous and associating that to AMG. Then we just need to talk to Sherry, because she has a man there on her side that is very polarizing. And I know I'm going to give a big shout out to him and shout out to AMG and Sherry and all of them. But Brad is a very polarizing dude.
Yeah,
You meet him, he has a huge smile on his face. He always seems happy. I mean, I'm sure if people walk into that shop, he is just ecstatic to see them. He's probably greeting them and shaking hands and smiling.
Yeah.
And
and it infuriates Eric to no end.
Yeah, I mean, he's all like, if you've not met Brad, the man is always, I don't know has he ever been angry? Like, I don't know what an angry.
Oh, I've heard him angry. I've heard him angry. It took a very offline conversation, offline story.
Okay.
But the point is,
it's hard to picture.
I want to separate out two things though. I don't think the jealousy angle. So from the comments, the jealousy angle was not pertaining to AMG. So two parts. The jealousy was me daring to critique it, and obviously that means I'm jealous, which obviously stands to reason. Very logical, very very solid point. But then the AMG angle is more along the lines of, well, because you were associated with that, it's like you're. First of all, my video, I wasn't speaking on behalf of AMG at any point. I was speaking on behalf of me. And the other piece of it is that, and I was giving an opinion, and again, in relative terms, it was pretty light opinion. I wasn't really going that heavily at it, but I was looking at what I saw as an opportunity to do some other stuff. But the other piece of it is that I think folks forget. So speaking of the card shop part element of it now, the card shops compete against each other, but not exactly, not in our space. In our space, it's a very strange way, because if you really think about it, a lot of them are very regionally based. And at the moment, as it stands, CardsHQ really isn't competing with anybody outside of Got Baseball Cards in the same region. They're the only real competitors they have, and the only real competitors they are. And the reason for that is because their online presence isn't fully activated. When your online presence is fully activated, you got your eBay store up and running, you've got your ComC account or whatever you're going to do, or maybe a Shopify store where you can sell stuff. At the moment, if I'm a buyer, I can buy stuff from AMG. I can also buy stuff from Burbank. I can buy stuff from Card Collector 2. I can buy stuff from Dave and Adams. I can buy it. I can buy stuff from them. They can sell stuff to me. I can't buy stuff from CardsHQ unless I buy it through that Whatnot sale. That's it. That's the only avenue in which I am, unless I happen to be living there. So the point is, at the moment, they're not competing with anybody except their local market. So when they activate everything else, then they become competitors to everybody else. But again, there's enough business to go around. There are going to be some folks that are going to, if you don't have the stuff I want, it doesn't matter what you're doing or where you are activated. But until then, you still don't have a fully actualized offer as far as being a card shop yet. And that doesn't mean they can't, because they have every opportunity to do that and activate it and turn it on. But I am separating out two things. When I do a video like that, I'm not looking at it from the AMGA's angle, because they're not concerned about anything that Cards HQ is doing. And to be blunt, neither is Burbank and neither is Card Collector 2, any of those guys. Card Collector 2 was there and made content at their trade night. He saw fit to go there, visit, participate in it, and make a video about it, because for them it's good content. And they figured that people would be interested. And guess what? It worked. That video has more than 40,000 views when I last looked at it the other day. So obviously people were interested. Again, going back to what I said earlier about it does draw eyeballs. It is interesting for people for now. Long term, can it be interesting? Can it be competitive for some of these other companies? Yes, but they're going to have their own niche. They got to figure out what that is, whatever that's going to be. But the breaking side of industry, there's plenty of competitors in breaking. The whatnot live stream thing, there's plenty of competitors in that space too. So each one is like its own area, and you're going to have your different competitors in that region, in that zone. I think a lot of that feedback, if you want to call it that, came back to people, I don't know, feeling like this need to come to the defense, to the White Knight defense of Jeff Wilson and Cards HQ. It's like, they'll be fine with or without you. They don't need your help. And if you really want to help them, then support them. If you really want to help them, then buy some stuff from them. That's the real support.
When you're talking about a business, that's the number one way to support somebody is give them your money.
Yeah. Pony up.
So
don't write Carlos a comment, because Carlos isn't moved. He didn't change his opinion.
No.
You want to show support for Cards HQ? Buy something. Buy a shirt, buy a hat, buy some merch. Go for it.
You know, going around and defending, people defending somewhat a business against what you're perceived as, not you, but someone may perceive as trolls on the internet, isn't really doing anything. Go spend your money.
But I wanted to touch on it because, like I said, no surprise, it did lead to a lot of engagement. We talk about the infamous engagement. There was engagement. There was no doubt engagement. But I think, to the disappointment of some of those folks, again, the minority, relatively speaking, it was the minority. Most people were like on board more or less with what I was getting at. And to put a close on this, to put a button on this before I get to the main topic, and if there's anything else you guys want to add, by all means, but just put an end on it for me. The main thing that I touched on, that I still stand by, and I stand by the whole video, but particularly what I stand by, is I still think it's a missed opportunity for them not fully, speaking of fully activating, to me, it's a mistake for them not fully activating their capabilities, which they have in-house. They have these capabilities to be able to be producing a steady dose of content under the Cards HQ brand, specifically, not just videos on Sports Card and Vector that are Cards HQ related, but you can do both. Nobody's saying don't do it, but I'm saying you could build an individual identity. There may be folks that may be interested in that, and I don't see any reason why not. And a lot of, like I said, people try to do a compare and contrast. When I talk about the AMG Collectibles podcast and things we do, it is a relatively small crew of folks. Everybody involved actually works at the store, with the exception of myself. So I'm not there. So I can host and I can help produce that element of it. But anybody that you see on that podcast when you're watching it actually works at the store. And when we record it before the store opens. And after we're done recording, we chat for a couple of minutes, and then the guys go in and open the store. They literally will go. So I'm basically pulling them off the floor before the store opens in order to record the podcast. And then they're off to work. They got to get started. So I don't have a dedicated person, and they don't have a dedicated person to create content. Cards HQ does have that luxury. So my point in that portion of the video was, take advantage of this luxury. You have somebody with a camera that can walk around and get this B-roll and get this content. You've got editors who are doing a tremendous job. You're literally producing content right out of the space whenever you're doing your debate show and where you're doing your Jeff Wilson podcast. You've got a studio in there, AKA you have the in-house capability to be producing some great content out of that space every single day if you want to. It's a choice.
It's just, I guess, interesting to me because we did a episode on this podcast several weeks ago discussing card shops and the importance of them and that sort of thing. And I'm going to be completely honest, and this isn't for one way or the other. I don't have any interest in like keeping up with the Cards HQ thing because it, like, my intent of ever traveling to Atlanta is like very slim. So the chance that I will ever attend or visit his shop is very slim. but I also was one that was very high and stated the importance of card shops. It's funny that there is such defense to this topic and this card shop, and again, I think it all just draws back to who it is. But for as many people out there that will, scream to the sky saying that card shops are irrelevant now and they're not that important, it's funny that there is so many people actually defending the topic if you say anything negative towards the card shop. So it's almost like a contradictory statement there. Um, people say they're not important, but then people want to defend it. So like make up your mind of which it is. So if it succeeds, awesome, great for Jeff and all the people involved. If it doesn't, then you know, he tried, right? I'm not gonna like sit there and poo-poo on him, but he tried. So it's just it's a weird topic and take, I guess, upon it.
That's fair. I think, like I said, it's testament, and we're gonna see. I'm kind, like I said, I've kind of enjoyed it during this brief. I was not surprised. It was funny because I made my little mini comeback. I had made a regular video, I think, this year. I think every piece of content I had on there was either a pickup video, a handful, and then either a podcast episode like this or the live stream. And it's like I decided to come back. It's like, all right, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, bring the engagement. I guess that's what we're gonna get today.
I have an idea for future content now.
Ooh. Brandon and Bobby road trip to Atlanta. Oh, I would love that. I would love that. All of a sudden, you got Bobby like angrily trying to like chase down somebody in Atlanta, and you're like holding him back. Bobby, no. Stop trying to attack random people in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think that's what the interwebs need is that content.
That, my friends, is truly quality high-end content that we
Bobby,
need.
if you can find us a sponsor, this might work.
I think we should get Whatnot on this. I don't even care. Like, there's got to be an angle that we can get Whatnot on this to sponsor it and pay for it somewhere.
Needham can sponsor
it. Needham can sponsor it. Hopefully, Needham can pay for the bail money because then you're going to need it. If Brandon can't chase Bobby down, that might be where this next thing's going. It became the second episode will be on Court TV. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But, there would be enough views that we should have enough revenue for the bail money.
One would hope.
Super chat, live stream, super chat,
super chat. All of a sudden, Eric, you and I do a live stream. It's like just covering the Court TV case, and it's like, what happens? It's like y'all, we need some for the legal fund. We need some legal fund for the Burrell.
Well,
it'd be quite the spectacle.
Deported back to Canada, I think, because Bob's going to be the first.
It'd be quite the spectacle. I must say. Well, that's an interesting.
Across the old friendship bridge, I like to call it, and
yeah,
and he gets turned over to the Canadian authorities at the halfway point. I can see it all now, man. We need this.
I think it'll send quite the message to the Americans. I think after he is celebrated with a ticker tape parade outside the Tim Hortons.
Yeah,
he's sensational, beautiful. So yes, so we'll touch on. So we'll flip over now to the other topic here. Had a little fun with that one. We'll see how that one plays out. But again, just bear in mind, as I said earlier, try to take it in the right spirit with a lot of these videos. They are opinion pieces, and opinion pieces means you don't have to agree. Like, it's completely fine to disagree. My only ask, I only have one. My only ask is if you would like to disagree with me, at least make sure you've watched enough of the videos so that you're not making an argument that is completely refuted in the video. That is the only ask I have.
Yeah.
That's the only one. Because if you tell me something that literally was refuted in the video, I'm going to simply roll my eyes and move on with my day. There's nothing I can do to help you at that point. At least watch enough of the video so you know what you're arguing against. And then by all means, happy to hear what you have to say, by all means. But that's fine. So best of luck to them. Hopefully they take at least some of those concepts under consideration, and hopefully they do some of those things that they were going to say. Within a couple of hours, they actually had a behind the card shop thing, but it was more of a documentary piece. Not exactly what I was talking about, but within a couple of hours of my video launching, they did have a piece of content. So there you go. Hey, maybe somebody's listening. Jeff, you're welcome.
You are a powerful force in this.
Crack the whip. Got
You
got
are
those
powerful.
bum editors off their seats and actually made them do a little bit of work. So there you go.
Were you the first subscriber?
Well, it was still on the Sports Card Investor channel. That's my problem. Right now, I
Okay.
think there should be a Cards HQ YouTube. I'm not talking about the breaking one that does the live stream. I think there should be a Cards HQ YouTube channel with Cards HQ exclusive content. That's my opinion. I would build an independent brand so it could be its own thing, and then people know where to go. And if they want to check it out, starting off on Sports Card Investor, I get it. He's already got the audience and subscriber base. I get that. But at some point, you got to wean it off and let it start building on its own. Give it a chance to grow and develop a little bit on its own. That would be my angle. But again, hey, listen, I'm just a jealous hater, man. I'm just a jealous hater. What do you want? I don't know what to tell you. So
I've been meaning to talk to you about that.
Well, I am a professional hater, though. It's like if my Tom Brady takes have taught y'all nothing, I am a professional hater. I'm really good at it, y'all. Really good at it. So it's fine. It's fine. Okay, so let's chat a little vintage. Let's start a little vintage. So this is the other going to be the remainder of the podcast. So we'll chat about that a little bit. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we've all got different approaches to collecting vintage. So that's a big piece of it. And one other thing I may do as part of this one, I may try to put a timestamp on it. So if you all want to skip the CardsHQ discussion and get to the vintage discussion, I'll give you that option on this episode. You're welcome in advance. So I'll find the timestamp and make it happen for you. But we've all got different approaches to it. Brandon had started to consolidate and figure out kind of the combination of things he wanted to hang on to. So that's one aspect of it. I've had my vintage projects over the year. I did share with the guys before we started. I was digging through a box here of some stuff. And one of the things I got in here is a bunch of 58 tops, including the 58 tops All-Star of Mickey Mantle. That wasn't actually part of my original Mickey Mantle run that I had originally. But this is a classic card. Like if you guys remember the 58 tops and the All-Star and the Sports Magazine All-Stars, this is an iconic card. Not a super high condition one, but a fairly clean copy. Like that's actually a pretty solid copy, all things considered. And by the way, if you are a Mantle fan, this one is a very affordable piece. Like you can get these ones in pretty decent condition, and it's not like super crazy in terms of cost. And they are pretty neat cards, and it is a 50s Mantle. So 100%. If you want to have one in the collection, that's a pretty solid piece. But one of the things that's sorting through that box was that it is kind of a graveyard of projects past that I had aspired to that I'm probably not going to pursue. So now my next trick is going to be figuring out what I'm going to do with that. On the hockey side, Eric has a variety of different projects he's working on because he's got a autograph version of one of the sets he collects, and he's got a regular version of it. And he, of course, picks up individual cards here and there that fit certain categories he's doing. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So before I get too deep into it, Eric, do you want to kind of explain some of the vintage projects you work on? Give just a little bit high level background on some of them.
Yeah. But my favorite vintage collection is the 1969-70 hockey set, both tops and O-Pee-Chee. O-Pee-Chee obviously has many more cards and inserts than the top set. And I've tried to come up with different ways to collect that year. I have the entire top set. I have in very good raw condition. I have a second set of top 69-70 that's not as nice. I kind of that was kind of like my first, and then I kind of upgraded, and now I have two sets. And that year they had stamps that look like postage stamps with players on them, and there was a space on the back of the card, and so you can, to get the card mint, you don't have the stamp on. But I also collect the cards that do have the stamps attached to them. I collect the stamps. They came in pairs. I collect them individually and in pairs. But one of the challenges and things I really enjoyed doing in the last couple of years with it is I'm trying to get as many of the cards signed in person. Now that's tough because a lot of the guys that will play in a 69-70 are either so old that they no longer sign or they've passed away. But there's still plenty of others out there that will still sign. And, I'll be seeing Serge Savard for example, on March 3rd. I'm going to have him sign his. That's actually his rookie card that year. So there are players still out there doing that, but I'm trying to get as many signed as possible, and it's not easy, And the ones that have already passed away, or I don't have a chance of meeting, I picked up on the secondary market.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. And how many do you have on the autograph one?
Quite a few. So
that's fair enough. While you're taking a look at that, I want to give Brandon a chance to give a little background. One of the things that we talked about in the past, and one of the things that you had done, is you had picked up a lot of different kind of iconic and quality vintage cards, and we talked a little bit about the consolidation, some of the thought behind that. So, do you want to touch on and elaborate a little bit on that, kind of your vintage journey, so to speak, where it's taken you?
Yeah, I mean, so we've tons of people have discussed many times what the pluses and minuses of the boom, pandemic, whatever you want to phrase it as. And one of the opportunities that was there is if you were already in the hobby, and really I would assume some people that weren't even in prior to the boom probably still did okay, but if you were in the hobby before the boom and you had cards, and especially the shiny stuff, the prisms and that sort of thing, there was potential to make a lot of money on absolutely the dumbest cards. Like, and I say that kindly, but some of the stuff I sold and what I sold it for was just ridiculous. And it allowed opportunity to obtain some cards that, quite honestly, I never even had dreamed about owning. And it was cool to get them. There was, some checklists I was working on and things of that nature. But then, as we kind of touched on, I looked back and I was kind of like, I feel like that whole journey also allowed us to veer off the paths that were most important to us. And I feel like I kind of allowed myself to do that. Now, I find it extremely amazing that I was able to own a Gaudy Ruth, and some of the other cards I was able to pick up over the time. But looking back on it, if the pandemic hadn't happened, I never would have went after those cards. Like, I've shared stories of me being literally cheap. Like, I missed opportunities because I was cheap, and I'm talking spending $50 on a player I really liked, and then to think that I was spending, 4,000 on a Ruth, it was like, this isn't me. And then my purpose was to hand them down to my kids, and I've seen patterns that my wife always tells me, you don't follow your gut. And I had this gut feeling regarding vintage, and some people will argue it, and it's perfectly fine. We all have different opinions of it. But I just have this feeling that as time progresses, vintage is going to become more common as far as availability. The thought has always been that vintage will sustain its value. I have thoughts opposite of that. I think vintage will suppress itself a bit because you're going to have higher supply and lower demand. And so it just, like, all of these thoughts combined together kind of formulated this purpose to get back to what really just meant a lot to me. And I've always been like, you can touch back on your 90s hockey and being like a Stars fan back when Madonna was there and everything else. And Eric has stories probably of the Bruins since like the 1600s. And, when I look back growing up, I had favorite, like, I didn't ever grasp really to a particular team. I was more like, I liked the Mariners because Griffey was there. But then when Griffey left, it was like, I'm not too big of a Mariners fan now. I liked the Magic when Shaq and Penny Hardaway was there. But when Shaq went to LA, like I couldn't follow him. I felt like I was going to be a bandwagon fan. So I've not had that history of tied to like a team, so to speak. So my repurposing of my collection with the Nationals and stuff, and those memories of the World Series and stuff that just happened, the Ravens, I became a Ravens fan and I've got players there. So I'm kind of refocused back to just those moments that I can actually connect with of becoming a fan of a team and not just a fan of a particular player like I was growing up. Because I once the player would leave, I would like, and I seen Scott do a video recently about what happens if your favorite player leaves the team. When I was a
Yeah.
kid, like I hated it. When Griffey left, I was like, what do I do? I'm not a Mariners fan now. When Shaq left, I'm not a Magic fan now. So as an adult now, I've been, Soto has now moved on to two different teams, and I'm still a Nationals fan, right? I've accepted that that's business now, and that players aren't going to likely stay for long careers anymore. And so
Mhm.
that's just part of it. And, Dallas, I became a Stars fan, as you can tell. And so it's just kind of a refocus back into the things that mean the most to me, and things like players, teams, that sort of stuff that I just have a connection with. Babe Ruth, I never watched the guy play. It was cool owning the card, but
Mhm.
it was opportunity that presented itself. It wasn't. It, I don't know. It's tough to explain for people to understand. It just there's different visions in collecting, I guess, and some people feel that they need to own those cards to have a successful collection. And to me, I felt like I only did it because the opportunity was there. And it didn't like me. The story was cool, but the meaning of it, like my Michael Taylor Superfractor, that connects with me a lot more than that 33 Ruth, if that
Sure.
makes any sense.
No, that's fair. And it does touch on the theme that we've talked about in the past about building the collection that you are happy with, as opposed to the collection that will get approval, so to speak, from the collecting masses, their stamp of approval. So it is an important theme. So in that sense, though, so just bringing it back into the topic as well. So from that perspective, then, are you kind of comfortable to stand pat with where you are with what vintage you have retained? Like where you currently stand, are you comfortable that you stand pat? Or is there still anything else that still of some interest to you?
There is some, yeah. So I have definitely kept all my Jackie Robinsons.
Mhm. Sure.
That's one player that I definitely wanted to keep, and there are a couple cards of his that I've never obtained that
Mhm.
if the opportunity presented itself, I would like to add them to the collection. There's the 52 Burke Ross,
Mhm.
and then obviously there's the 48 Leaf, which is very expensive,
Mhm.
and the Bond Bread is another one that I've always wanted, but I've been scared to purchase because I know there's like counterfeits or reprints or whatever out there. It's a hard one to determine legitimacy of. But yeah,
Mhm.
there are still some cards. I kept up my 50. You showed Mantle. I kept the 56 Mantle,
Mhm.
um, partly because that's just a cool card.
Mhm.
Mickey said it was his favorite, and also that card was obtained from James Gillum, who's become a really, he's basically a family member now, and he never sells cards, and he's sold that to my wife as a gift to me.
Mhm.
So it was nice, to have a piece that he passed along, and it's in my collection. So it has more than just a card meaning to it.
Mhm.
Um, my 55 Bowman Hank Aaron, that's kind of the card that I had as a kid that I regretted as an adult that I no longer owned. And that was kind of my first vintage pickup when,
Mhm.
as an adult trying to tread back into that space. So that's one that I'm going to keep. So there are some that I'm still keeping. And, there's a few that trickle the interest of maybe possibly picking up if opportunity presents itself, mostly on the Jackie Robinson spectrum.
Sure. No, that's fair. And that's why I say your journey was going to be different than mine or Eric's. So that's why I wanted to get kind of that perspective in a little different angle, which to me is perfectly valid. That's the reason why, part of the reason I thought, number one, this topic is straightforward because we do understand it and we all have our own different perspectives and journeys on it. But then the second thing is it also pushes back on the idea, because there's still some folks in the vintage side of things that, and I've heard these commentaries a number of times. They're like, oh, well, as collectors, mature, they move into vintage. As someone who started collecting vintage early, trust me, it is nice to have the exposure early, but it also means you can kind of decide what you like and what you don't like. And that's why that's why I gave this card as an example. There was a point in time in my life, and I'll get into that a little bit more here in a minute. I want to let Eric finish his piece as well, since he's been sorting. So hopefully he can give us an answer here in a second. But the reason I have these specifically is because at one point in time, my thought process was on doing the Topps Bowman run. Like that was an aspirational thing that I was going to try to do. So that meant I needed cards like this. I still very much like this card, but truthfully, just hanging on to it for the sake of hanging on to it probably isn't going to make sense. I'm going to pick and choose. I'm going to be very careful on this. Go ahead.
So I want to ask a question of that, because I think this is
Sure.
some of where some of my passion for the vintage also kind of fell off.
Mhm.
I wanted to do the Topps rookies, because some players, they don't have a Topps rookie, but they have a first Topps appearance or what have you. And I thought that would be cool. But did part of your disinterest in the Mantle run arise because you start looking at it and you're like, there's some of these cards, like, I'm gonna be like pretty much impossible to own, like the 52 Topps Mantle, or
Mhm.
maybe even a 52 Maze gets really expensive. So did that push into some of it? Because that's kind of where I was feeling. It was like, all right, I
Sure.
got some of these, but I can't keep tossing thousands of dollars out on a single item, because I'm like, I'll never complete it.
Right. So just speaking for myself, that wasn't necessarily the factor because I had started so early. So I separate two things. I think for some people, when they talk about the Mantle run, they include, the All-Star card. They include a lot of the subset cards and all that. When I was looking at the Mantle run, so there were two things. The Topps Bowman run, I'm talking about the sets. So that would have included the Mantle no matter what. So that was the first thing. But I wasn't necessarily discouraged by the cost because at the time that I started it, if it had been if I had been sitting there at the time that I started it in my teens early on, and I had been mapping it out, then at that point in the 90s, it would have made sense for me to be like, okay, maybe I start setting aside the money now, hit the big ones, hit the big guys early, go get the Mantle rookie, go get the 52 Tops, go get some of those key pieces early on, and really go quality over quantity early, hit the big hitters before the price really escalates and does this. Um, and then work my way backwards, because then it'd actually be downhill from there. You get the big hitters and it actually gets relatively easier as you go forward. When I build a set today, I actually go get the Hall of Famers and short prints first, because then if worse comes to worse and I get tired of it, I've actually got the most desirable cards. They're the easiest and most liquid to move if I have to work in reverse.
And easiest to find.
Absolutely. So strategically, it actually works quite well. But it wasn't the cost that discouraged me, really. It was just that as I went through it, I had actually built most of the Mantle run. So just speaking Mantle, I had from 53 Tops, I had through 69. So I had 53 to 69, got all the regular Mantles, all the base card Mantles. And then for Bowman, I had 52 Bowman, 53, 54, and 55. Yes, 52 through 55. So I had all the Bowmans except for the rookie. So the only thing I was missing was the rookie, 51 Bowman, and the 52 Tops, the two most expensive ones. But had it been my desire to finish that with everything else that I had ready to go, if that had just been my desire, I could have just funneled all my energies into it and gone and picked up the card. That would have been the way, instead of buying all the other things. I just enjoyed so much other stuff more. And the bigger issue for me was a lot of the cards there, I just don't like them. 57 Tops is one of the ugliest sets. I just hate 57 Tops. I hate them all. So I despise that set. So I'm like, why? So in order to do this run, I would have to build a 57 Top set. And if I hate the set, that sounds miserable to me. That sounds terrible. If I really
And that
genuinely
set
don't enjoy it, why would I do that to myself?
that set actually has quite a few Hall of Fame rookies in that
It does.
set, in the 57.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but it was always
I think
ugly to
most
me.
all of them are
Aesthetically, it was always
reasonably,
ugly to me, and that's my problem.
yeah, they're even the Hall of Fame rookies in that set. And I don't know if maybe it's the people just don't like the set, but I think what is the most expensive? Brooks Robinson. I
Yeah,
think
Frank. I
he's the
think
most
Frank
expensive
Robinson
one,
is also a rookie in '57. I believe Frank
but
Robinson is another one.
he's cheaper than Brooks. So yeah, and I
Mhm.
mean, you got I think Don Drysdale's in it. Like I think there's like 5 or 6 Hall of Famers in '57, but all of them are relatively cheaper, and that's still looking at it. It's a somewhat early '50s top set.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember that. So, two things. Number one, I do, like I said, personal opinion, strictly personal opinion. Aesthetically, I think it's a really ugly set. That's first. Second, it is the first set that they went to what is today the standard size trading card.
Standard, yeah.
So 50
Yep.
go take a look at a 56 tops and then go take a look at a 57 tops, and you're going to notice two things. One of them is much more attractive than the other, in my opinion. I love the 56 set personally. So I was very happy when I finished that set years ago. And I might want to upgrade a couple of cards, but my set is complete, which I'm thrilled with. But that 57 set is such a letdown after. Like the very next year, it's like you guys didn't even try. Oh, this is very sad. 58, it's a little more colorful. I kind of like it. It's almost got like a magazine design on it. Like I actually prefer 58 to 57 by quite a bit. 59 kind of feels like you're mailing it in. 60, I actually like. 60 personally, I kind of like that set. But that's my point. I can go year by year with you and go through Pops and Bowman, and I can tell you I like the aesthetic of this set. This set, not so much. The point is, if you're going to do a complete run, Brandon, you have to do them all, whether you like them or don't like them. And after a while, to your point, it does become really prohibitively expensive. So the question is, how many of my resources do I wish to devote to this when I have other collections? Even at the time I'm collecting vintage, I was already collecting Medano. So I've got this player collection I'm working on. I've got this other stuff I'm working on. And the thing is, I'm very passionate and enjoying doing this. I still enjoy getting these vintage cards, and I did. But as I get older and I became, funny enough, as I became more sophisticated, I actually turned down the amount of vintage because I'm like, this is not a good use of my resources because there's a lot of this stuff I just don't like. It does not interest me, but it's not lack of knowledge. It's not lack. I've done my study. I know what's going on with
Yeah.
these sets. I know what the short prints are. I've studied the sets. It doesn't interest me. I don't want them.
I will say to just tie a little bit to, and again, I know some folks will shout at the clouds and say I'm wrong or whatever, and that's fair. There,
Well, Eric was just going to do that in principle before he even heard what you were going to
there's
say.
both sides, but since I got into the reselling stuff and kind of seeing the estate sale side of things and what happens when someone hands down things or passes away or whatever, I had proclaimed that the vintage was allowing me to have fun in the hobby. And I told my kids, they probably could remember me telling them, I get to enjoy it today, they get to enjoy it tomorrow. Okay. And that was kind of my theory behind it. But after seeing what a lot of these families go through or what happens to the belongings after these folks pass away, it was like, I'm leaving my kids a headache. And I truly do have a feeling that, we would love to believe our age that vintage is just going to continue going up, 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 and, it's going to be glorious. But you have to look at the time periods and the way they all play out, right? The kids today, most of them, even though Babe Ruth is a huge name, many of them, even if they are baseball fans, won't know hardly anything regarding who Babe Ruth really was. It's crazy to think, but they're not connected with that. Like maybe even some of us were. And I do feel that, this is all supply demand based. And the more supply that continues to get funneled into the marketplace, the more people our age are either going to have what they want or they're not going to be interested in or whatever. You're going to have a higher supply with a lower demand, and you're going to see an imbalance. And I didn't want to pass all this stuff down to my kids whenever it's my time to go. And then, them be left with a headache to try to figure out how to get rid of it or get taken to the cleaners on it because they just, who knows what it would have even been worth at the time. So that's also kind of my thought. Just some things I've seen, some gut feelings I've had, whether right or wrong. They're my feelings and just my choices. I'm still collecting and I'm having more fun, I think, now. So, and that's the most important part.
There you go. So Eric, you've had some time to sort there. You got kind of a. So I'll get back to kind of finishing my story, but before I do you want to give us a little ballpark autographs? How many for that set? Whereabouts are you at?
These are all autographed from 6970.
So he's got a 1600 count box, and most of one row looks full with one touches. It looks like.
So the big ones are, so like you said, you kind of the big ones are easy to find. So you got, you got Bobby Orr, got Gordie Howe, right?
Yep.
And then of course this one is you can't get anymore because Tony Esposito has passed away. This is his rookie from the O-Pee-Chee set.
Yep.
Okay. And just this past expo, I was just looking here, just at the past expo in November, I was able to get a Jacques Leperrier and Les Binkley. Like I said, on the 3rd, we're having Serge Savard and Pete Mahovlich coming in. And I'm going to get Serge to sign another rookie card because I have one already. Plus the Conn Smythe Trophy card that because he won that year. So I'll have him sign both for the set. Now,
ballpark wise, how many cards are in that box? You can guesstimate. You don't have to get it down to the right. The last,
like 10, 20, 30, 40. Yeah, it's probably like 70.
All right. No, that's fair. That's what I say. I was just kind of curious, ballpark wise.
Topps has 132 cards. The O-Pee-Chee set, I forget at the moment off the top of my head, but it has much more. And I just love chasing them. I could go on, if I was rich, I could go on eBay and buy 20 autographed cards from the set tonight. But you got to pick and choose, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. I've always said that someone who is just crazy wealthy, I don't think they're having as much fun as we are in this hobby. Because when you can just snap your fingers and have something, that's not as fun as the waiting game and the shopping and the kind of managing your money. And I can only buy one card today. Which one am I going to leave on the table and come back and get another time? People that are just stupid rich, I remember there was a documentary done on Michael Jackson years ago, and they followed him around shopping, and he walked into this such a high price store that the three of us aren't even allowed to walk through the door. Okay. And he just walked in and went, I'll take that. I'll take that. I'll take that. I'll take that. Oh, that would look good in the living room. I'll take that. And then he walked out and he just dropped like $2-something million. I don't want to be able to do that in this hobby, because I wouldn't appreciate the efforts it takes to get these things and to make financial decisions over what I can or cannot afford, what condition I can afford versus what I can't, and that's what makes this more gratifying and more of a treasure hunt than just buying stuff.
But that right there is like, it's a good topic and thought process behind it. But why does it have to be the patience or the hunt because of the dollar? Like, you hear it so often. It's not about the value. It's not about the money. It's not about this. Do you find it more gratifying when you've been able to obtain something because you could afford it? Or do you find it more gratifying because you obtained something because you hadn't been able to find it? Because that's part of like what I've reflected back on. I'll use it again, that Taylor Superfractor, right? He's not the most expensive player in the world. He's not the most popular baseball player. He's not like a superstar. But finding that card was not about how much it was worth or whether or not I could afford it. It was finally obtaining and hunting that piece down. I don't think everything that we hunt for has to be based on whether or not we can afford it. I think sometimes we can hunt for little nuggets that are relatively cheap.
Oh
They're
yeah,
just hard to find.
absolutely. And it goes
So
both ways. But the more money you have, the easier it is to get your hands on things.
So I'll separate two things. So I think you're making a very valid point, but I want to touch on something here that I think is important because Eric is making a point here about curation. So because I want to kind of touch on this, and you're making a point about scarcity. So both things are valid, by the way, but there's a little bit of difference in kind of the approach to it, and I think there's a valid validity to both. And also, ironically, it touches on the first half of the podcast, the topic about the card shop and everything. And I think part of what separated me, and I promise I won't spend too much time on it, I'll come back to this conversation here. But part of the reason why I looked at it through a certain prism was because of what was being promised, what was being discussed, but also that a lot of people spend a lot of time focusing on the grandiosity of the money spent on the thing. And the important thing is, and I think what actually hurts it in terms of my eyes looking at it, is that I know that if I just decided to spend, if I just had an unlimited budget, I could replicate everything that was discussed with CardsHQ almost anywhere. I could build it on the North Pole for you. And if I had even more money and I wanted to just spend it, I could build a biodome around it to house it in the North Pole. So the point is, I could throw enough money at the problem and replicate it or even do better. And at that point, it's not so impressive because it's like, no, at that point, it's just money. Circling back around to this, though, circling back around to this topic, and Brandon asked earlier about what hurt about the Mantle run and the run I was looking at and everything. It wasn't the money. I know that if it was just my goal in life and I wanted to finish that Topps Bowman run and that's what I dedicated my energies to, and I put every hobby dollar I have into it, I could finish that run. I 100% could. It's not the money. That's not the issue. The reality though is, as I said, number one, a lot of them just don't interest me. I don't like them objectively, personally. I don't like them. But then number two, they are available enough as opposed to your Michael Taylor card, where it is a one of one. So you have to track down that specific card with a lot of the stuff we're talking about, like the projects I'm working on. I'm working on a 53 Bowman color set. Every single one of those cards is available for me right now. If it's just a matter, if you just put enough money in my pocket right now, I could literally go on eBay and I could hit buy it now and buy every single card that I have left on that checklist and finish the set tonight. No problem. I could buy them one at a time and I would still be able to finish the entire set tonight. And that's not the point. In a situation like that, it's not that it's not available. It's that, well, maybe you want to build a set with a certain aesthetic in mind. Maybe it's not just about money. It's just like, yeah, I like the picture, the registration. I like the registration to look a certain way. Or maybe I want the centering to be a certain way. Or I want this, I'm looking to, so there are maybe 50 copies in front of me. So literally I could buy any of these 50 copies, but I'm looking for a certain look. And if for some reason I don't see it in those 50 copies, well, maybe I'll wait. And then maybe I'll get a chance to see another 50 copies. And in the course of that, maybe I'll find the appropriate one. And then that's the one I purchase. It gets added to my set. And there we go. So it's not availability in this case. It's not even money in this case. It's just I'm looking for the specific one to fit the aesthetic of the set I'm trying to build. And that's a decision you can make as a collector to make it fit whatever it is you're trying to achieve, whatever you're trying to accomplish. So for me, that's the roadmap portion of it. I'm working on a 53 Bowman color set. I'm also going to be working on a 53 top set because I love both of those sets. I appreciate both of those sets. And then after I finish that, I'll move to the next one on my list and I'll move to the next one on my list. But the amount that's left on that list got shrunk down because I started off with this big old list of all these sets. And I'm like, you know what? I honestly don't care about a bunch of these sets. So you know what? Scratch it off, scratch it off, scratch it off, scratch it off. And then what's left, these are the ones that interest me. So when I'm done, I'm going to have the sets that I actually like. And those are the ones that I'm going to work on. And when I'm done, then I'll move on and start working on something else that interests me. We build the Josh Rosen Super PC. Obviously, that's what we got to do.
And that the reason I brought it up because you had mentioned the dollar amount, Eric.
Yeah.
But I actually think it's cool the way you're building. And yes, I said you're doing something cool. You can dance later.
Scandalous.
I just
Um,
assume you're drunk. Go ahead.
no, I do seriously. I think it's cool how you have a set that you have a passion for, and it would be very easy to say, "Okay, I built a set." And then you can say, well, let me do it in the OPG because that's another aspect, to the older tops stuff. You could do tops and OPG and baseball if you wanted to do Venezuelan and, what the other one I'm drawing a blank on, but there's a fourth in some circumstances. Um, but anyway, you get my point. There's two versions you could do, and you did both of them. And then you're like, well, let me take it a step further, and I want it autographed. That it's not necessarily monetary because I don't know of anybody seriously expensive in that set that comes to mind. Maybe you showed the Esposito and you said that was his rookie, right?
Yep.
That's probably the most expensive card in the set, right?
Well, you have Orr and Howe that are pretty expensive to buy, but yeah, those are like the top three.
Okay, so out for monetary standings, it's probably not an overly expensive set to build in general, but you have found ways to not just build the set and be done with it and say, I've accomplished. You have taken it to other elements. And as you've added those elements, it's added the difficulties of obtaining specific pieces. So it keeps you involved, it keeps you entertained, it keeps you hunting. Because I do believe that and I don't want to say this to fluff any feathers, the people that truly enjoy this hobby for what it is, the thing that keeps us motivated and in it is literally that passion of the hunt, that excitement of finding a piece. And it's not necessarily how much that piece costs, it's that passion of accomplishing that goal. As Carlos said, maybe it's curating a set a specific way. In your
Mhm.
case, it's doing different models of the same set, but autographed versions or the stamped versions, doubles and singles and all. You found ways to keep that passion going and that hunt continuing. So, you know, I I, I do feel that it's cool the way you're doing it. There's no other way to say it because you found something you love and you found ways to continue pushing that on. So
And thank you, first of all. And second, the set itself just allows you to do so many different things. It just had all these different inserts in it and subsets and booklets and stamps and little other players head stamps that you could put into the book. I mean, this was like the first set in hockey that I can think of that just had all these different levels of collecting that set. And if you get creative, you can expand on that. And that's what I'm just that's so when I especially when I go up to Canada, it's more accessible to find these. And I get sometimes I buy cheaper banged up ones, nothing too destroyed because it won't look good. But I get something that might not be in perfect shape because that's the one I'm going to get autographed. Because I'm not going to spend something, a lot of money for a mint card and then have them autograph it.
here's a
Like,
fun question.
or whatever. Go ahead.
So you're working on a set that is 55 years old, correct?
Mm-hmm.
If we were to hypothetically peek into the future, and you're talking about all the different inserts and everything else, in 55 years in the future, do we see teenagers moving into adulthood or kids that moved into young adult, whatever, doing a similar thing with like 2023 Prism football that has 60 some different parallels out there,
Yeah, right.
and finding ways to try to make the runs of, their favorite colors or everything else, and then trying to go even further and get the players to sign it. And realistically, because what you're doing right now, if you think about it, it's only 55 years ago that that set was released.
Only
Does
55
that
years
same
ago.
passion hold true 55 years from now on a set today that has even more options, more challenges upon it? Do we see that in the future? Because I personally don't.
I hope so. I mean, I hope that people in the future are going to have the collecting bug still, but with more technology, I mean, there was a time period where collecting cards was the most entertaining thing you could do, as a kid or whatever. And now, you got computer games and a cell phone that can tell you what the weather is in, Yugoslavia in 5 seconds. So, um, I don't know if the younger generation is going to continue to really collect. We saw during the pandemic, the younger generation decided they were going to all become investors and make money, which was great because you want to see young kids being entrepreneurs and and make money for themselves and learn business and interact with people. And because especially what's the biggest complaint about young kids is that they're all isolated and staring at their phones. Well, kids in this hobby went out and went table to table and went, are you buying, are you selling, are you doing this, are you doing that, and making handshake deals and moving big amounts of money around at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. So that was all great, but
Eric, you're going down a very interesting path that is worthy of another episode. But he was talking about the depth. He wasn't just talking about collecting. He was talking about going into the ridiculous amount of depth, similar to what you're doing. And the answer is no.
I didn't see a lot of young collectors.
Yeah.
So my fear is that in the future, when these collectors grow up, these young kids grow up and have kids of their own that they want to pass this hobby on to, there's only going to be a small handful of people that actually collect and want to chase and build.
I think even the ones that do are not necessarily going to want to go into that level of depth. So kind of to answer Brandon's question, with the point was with the amount of parallels in the versions, whereas you are exploring every aspect of that 68, 69 set, the current iteration would require dozens and dozens and dozens of parallels. So it's not just collecting the set, it's collecting the set and collecting the gold prism version and collecting the black prism version. The answer is no. The answer is no. They might pick hypothetically, future, they're still collecting, they're still passionate, they're still into it. They'll probably pick one or two that are their favorites, if anything, and then they'll pursue that, and that'll be the end of it. Then they'll move on. Because I think once you reach a certain point, it's like it's like, is it even worth the effort to go through that many iterations of the exact same thing just to 2 or 3, sure. 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 50? No, the answer is no.
Yeah, it's
by the
up
way,
to 60 something now.
Yeah. And by the way, to be clear, I still don't understand why we're making such a big deal out of that, Brandon, because everybody knows that the height of human civilization was 1998 Topps Tech that had 180 versions. You had 90 versions of the base and 90 diffractors. That is 180. So this is but merely a third. So we're not even warmed up yet, bro. That's the height of human civilization. We already peaked in 1998. It's over.
Oh, well, then I'm selling my collection tomorrow.
Yeah, like, fools. I tried to warn y'all. I tried to warn you. 180 different versions, Eric. 180 different parallels.
So there's 180 parallels of one color.
Yeah, each one had a different
one that was even more than that.
I think 180 was the maximum. I think that because you had 90 patterns, so each base card had 90 patterns available, and then the diffractor, you had a diffractor version of each one of the 90 patterns. So that's how you get to 180.
And this was a baseball product?
1998 Topps Tech.
Yeah, well, see, baseball's stupid.
And there's some of them that didn't even get made. Like some patterns didn't get made for some players.
Some of them I've definitely never seen. There's a few that I have definitely never seen.
Yeah,
They'll definitely
there
never
was
see.
less
So
of some made. Yeah, it was crazy.
hypothetically on paper, there should be 180 versions of each one of the base cards. So
Yeah.
again, I don't want to hear it, Brandon. I don't want to hear a damn complaint about 40 or 50 parallels. That's nothing. Nothing. We had 90 patterns, and then the diffractor version of all 90 patterns. So nothing. So Panini doesn't even know what's coming yet. Like, y'all get on Topps Text level from 1998. You're not even close. Not even close.
I'm glad I stopped collecting modern in the 90s, because if that was something I got into, or if they did that with hockey and I got into that, I would have lost my mind and every cent chasing. And
Well,
I
to be fair,
think
you would have lost
though,
your mind sooner. You would have lost your mind sooner.
yeah, well, I'm glad I stopped and went, I'm just collecting vintage. Screw you people.
I think though, Eric, you wouldn't have. Just being honest, because if you are able to zone into a set and like have a passion for it, if you had found like particular, maybe insert sets or things like that that you really enjoyed and didn't try to go after all of it, I think you would have still had a lot of fun.
Well, I was possibly, I mean, who knows, but there was just a period of time in the 90s where I had to make a decision because I couldn't keep up with, the 500 different products and the inserts and this and that all started coming. And then you started having autographs, and then you started having jerseys, and it blew up. And I'm like, I can't keep up with this. I'm just a young kid. I was like in college. I'm like, I can't afford a pizza, but they want me to, start paying all this money for cards. And I said, no, I'm sticking with vintage.
Which one more expensive, chocolate sticks or packs of cards at the time?
Oh, they're probably similar, like 25 cents a piece. So,
So we've got the truth.
yeah,
that's all I'm saying. We learned the truth comes out.
We
eventually
see what was given up.
Yeah.
What wasn't.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
We've exposed.
When I met my wife in 1994, I weighed 148 pounds, and I was doing all these different distance running races all over the New England area. I'd travel and go and run and this race, that race.
I love that you're trying to portray this as if you weren't running away from people. The villagers were chasing you with pitchforks and torches, and that's why you were running.
And then I met my wife and started skipping workouts and races to go on dates and hanging out with her. And then I found chocolate sticks, and now I'm like, 225, and I don't quite know how that happened.
1/4 at a time.
Yeah. I don't know what happened.
1/4 at a time.
Yeah.
I think we've learned a lot tonight. I think we've learned a lot. So let's put a button on it there. We will follow up on Eric's backstory and his excuses of running. It's like when you're running away from people, that's a different conversation. Like that's not quite the same context, but fair enough. It burns calories either way. Fleeing terror, burns calories. That's the thing. So hopefully you folks enjoyed that. We can come back with a similar topic later on if you wish, but we wanted to give you a little background on some of our vintage journeys, so to speak. Different, like I said, different paths. Eric has a very focused path on a thing. Brandon has certain specific items he's doing. I've got my own roadmap and kind of my thing that I'm doing, but I did explore the space on a lot of these different sets over the years. I've had cards from a variety of different. I've collected some pre-war, and I've enjoyed some of that as well. But it's one of those things where you have to kind of find your lane. I always thought it was kind of limiting if you sit there and like, oh, okay, I guess I've matured. The premise almost was like, oh, I've matured as a collector, so I should collect vintage. Like, well, collect it if you want to. Collect it if it interests you. Collect if it intrigues you, by all means. But if it doesn't,
just to reiterate, too, nothing against people that love going down all the different paths of vintage, and if they cherish vintage and truly feel that it's the future and the best way to put your money in and everything. But there's nothing wrong with collecting just things that you truly enjoy either. I will say, we're sitting here recording this on February 19th, and I have already this year purchased almost as many cards, I think, as I did all of 2023. And that's just a matter of back to finding the things that I truly want and that actually means something to me. I bought 2 cards last night that were football, and I don't share a lot of football on the channel or in general. I haven't shown a lot of football stuff, and it was a Chad Johnson rookie auto that I found on card, Bengals uniform, and an AJ Green. And people might say, well, you're a Ravens fan. But there was a period of my life that I actually was involved with the Bengals. And I was at AJ Green's first ever training camp, And so there's connections there. There's pieces to these cards that actually have a meaning to me. And, I can and have enjoyment with that. I have a lot of Chad autos that I got from him personally, but I didn't have an on-card rookie auto in his Bengals uniform. So that was an awesome pickup I found. And so it's just a matter of refocusing and making this what it's supposed to be, and that is fun and meaningful. And that's what I'm getting back to. So
Moving words. I think it's fair. So we'll put an end on that one. I will recommend and I will encourage you, if you do check this out and enjoy it, if you can give us, I'd love to get some feedback from you in the comments section if you're checking it out on the YouTube. These do become available also on Spotify and Google, Apple Music, whatever podcast of choice. It's on several of them if you want to check it out that way. YouTube is generally the best way because then you also get the visuals. We'll try to describe it here and there where we can, but you'll get the full experience there. I think on Spotify they also have it on video. So if you want to check out the Spotify video, it's there as well. But so that'll be it for myself. So Brandon, Bobbles and Ball Cards and 540 Flips. He actually had a 540 Flips video earlier. If you do check it out a day or two after this one uploads. These podcast episodes are on Tuesday mornings when they do upload. And we've also got Eric Sanderson Door, so you can send all of your 68, 69 fan fiction, whatever. He's into that kind of thing. So
69,
very excited.
close enough.
Whatever, one of them. One or the other. You can send him your fan fiction.
Yeah.
That he's very excited about those things. And listen, that might be another avenue of collecting for him. Like, there's a lot. It's the important thing.
When it comes to that set, anything that we can do to mix it up, I'm in.
Exactly. Sounds perfect. So we've got that, and then we'll have more up these episodes coming up. Otherwise, on the YouTube channel, more videos coming up and live streams on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we're at least 5% less mature. We did challenge that a little bit today. I'm not going to lie. We started going down a couple paths. We did reel it back in. We were able to bring it back. We brought it back. So on Friday, though, we won't try. On Friday, though, we will not even try.
I did attack Brad. That's not appropriate for the podcast.
For this venue, it's not right. The good news is on Friday, we will not hold back. There will be no pretenses of anything resembling professionalism. But we do thank those of you who are listening, and we do thank our friends at AMG Collectibles, amgcollectibles.ca, and the AMG Collectibles YouTube channel, where there will be another episode, some new upcoming product, and some cool stuff that came in the store. If you like Upper Deck Clear Cut Hockey, there's definitely a heavy dose of Upper Deck Clear Cut Hockey. So there's a little spoiler for you if you check it out, because that episode will drop right around a little bit after this one, when on the YouTube channel. So for Brandon and Eric and myself, have yourselves a good one, and we'll catch you in the next episode.